I woke up before my alarm went off. The silence in the apartment was louder than any other sound. After my father's funeral, something broke inside me. Not loudly, not suddenly. It was more like a small crack in the glass, slowly expanding, not allowing the crack to break through, but also not allowing me to forget about its existence. Tuesday. I returned to work after 3 days of official leave, which had been approved in advance. My boss, Larry, wrote to me before I left. "Take as much time as you need. Everything is under control here." I believed him, not because I was naive, but because he had been my boss for 5 years, and because I still believed in humanity in business relationships. But when I walked into the office, something was wrong. The looks, the silence in the open office, the absence of the usual, "Hi, Jess." It was like I had returned from prison, not from vacation. At 9:13 a.m., I opened my email. The first message was titled, "Subject Termination, sent yesterday, 6:02 p.m. from Larry. After reviewing our current resources and strategic priorities, we have to let you go. Your last day is Friday." No call, no word, just a letter. My heart didn't ache. It stopped. Not because of the dismissal, because of how it was done, because of the impersonality, because I had become a line in an Excel spreadsheet labeled expenses. I sat motionless. No anger, no tears, only cold. And one thought spinning in my head like a whisper. That's it? After everything I've done for them? I was fired for my silent loss, but it was in that silence that my revolution began. I didn't know yet that this wasn't just the end. It was the beginning of the collapse of General, from within. It wasn't the dismissal that broke me. It was the silence of those I trusted. It took me less than a minute to realize. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision, and it didn't come from below. It came from above. I saw my colleague Krista's gaze tremble as I approached. She was always the first to hug me when we released new versions. And now, silence. A sip of coffee, her head down. A silent conspiracy, as poisonous as an order. I remembered how last year I refused to move to our competitors, Novacor. They offered me a 30% raise, a dream team, and a flexible schedule. But I stayed, not for the money, for loyalty. I believed that General wasn't just a company. I was convinced that here we could build something real, lasting, and humane. Now I see that I was wrong. I gathered my things, my laptop, my Mont Blanc pen, a gift from my colleagues after the launch of Atlas Cloud, a few personal photos. Everything else had already been deleted. Files, access, status. I left not as an employee, but as a reminder that loyalty offers no guarantees. As I was leaving the office, Mick, my analyst, walked past me. He stopped for a second. "Is it true?" I just nodded. "That's not fair, Jess." "I know." The next day, I called Novacor. "We still want you," said their CEO, "more than ever." And I said yes. No drama, no fuss, just, "I'm ready." But I didn't go there alone. Over the next week, 4 more key members of my team handed in their resignations, one by one, quietly. No thank you letters, no dramatic scenes. They just left, following me. Because sometimes principles are more important than comfort, and because they knew I would never have left first if I hadn't been fired. A fever broke out at General. Deadlines were missed. Releases were delayed. Technical support worked around the clock. And at new meetings, there were people who didn't know what Atlas Cloud was or why it couldn't just be restarted from scratch. General, a corporation with flawless processes and soulless orders, began to collapse under its own weight, not because of sabotage, because of a loss of momentum. They thought they fired me. But in reality, they fired my team. And while General was drowning in its own processes, I was writing a strategy for the future. But not for them, for us. They could take away my badge and my email, but a voice is not a system. It cannot be turned off. At Novacor, I started breathing again. Not right away, not confidently. At first, in small sips, cautiously, like an animal that has escaped from a cage but doesn't yet believe the door will stay open. No one asked me why I left General. They knew, and they didn't ask what I could do. They had already seen it. I sat down in the conference room with our architects, and for the first time in many months, my idea wasn't interrupted with the phrase, "That's not a priority for this quarter." My team, no longer subordinates but allies, began to thrive. Amy, who was considered emotionally unstable at General, created a new analytical model of user behavior in 2 weeks. Toby, whom Larry called an overgrown kid with a gaming addiction, set up a better automatic request distribution system than our former contractors had in 6 months. And then Rachel showed up. She was still working at General. At 2:14 a.m., she sent me a message. "I saw him take your plan and call it his own, in front of investors. No one objected, but I felt so bad that I couldn't stay silent." I replied simply, "You don't have to stay silent." In the morning, she sent me another message. "I'm not ready to leave, but I can help from the inside if you want." I wasn't planning a spy game, but a system that devours its own will destroy those who remain silent. Rachel saw that, and I let her see more. Meanwhile, General was trying to save its reputation. They posted job openings for the positions they had lost. The wording was impressive. New opportunities, restructuring for efficiency. But screenshots of termination emails were circulating on LinkedIn. My former colleagues started liking posts about ethical leadership and the value of humanity. Not publicly, but a like is also a voice. And while General hid its problems behind plastic smiles, we at Novacor were testing a new feature they had been trying to launch since last summer. We did it in 4 weeks, and for half the price. When Rachel sent me the second email, I realized that General no longer controlled even its own walls. It was still quiet, but the silence no longer belonged to them. It became our weapon. They took my idea as if it had been theirs all along. On Monday morning, Rachel sent another email. This time, not just a screenshot. It was a copy of their new Manifesto of Change, signed by Larry. General is not changing because of the crisis. We are transforming from within. A new phase, new values. I read it, and something inside me shuddered. Values? It was like watching a thief swear he was a philanthropist. But what struck me even more was the phrase at the bottom. The innovative pulse routing feature was launched thanks to the leadership team. Pulse routing is ours, my concept, Amy's code, Toby's architecture, all created at Novacor over the past 4 weeks. General didn't just steal an idea. They stole our story. I didn't panic. We had timestamps, documentation, Git repositories. I wrote one short message in Slack. Everything we do, we document. We're not going to argue. We'll show them. The team responded, "Got it." While General bragged about what they stole, we were preparing an update they couldn't even copy. The approach changed completely. I was no longer playing by their rules. I was writing new ones. That same week, I saw Larry for the first time since he was fired. It was a Zoom conference for an industry forum. He was speaking on a culture of accountability in a rapidly changing environment. Him? Accountability? His smile was like a mesh stretched over cracks. I turned on the recording and sent the link to Rachel. "Listen to where he's taking General, and tell me if this is still the same company." She replied an hour later. "I've handed in my resignation." I sat in silence, staring at the message. Not triumphantly, silently, with the weight of the moment. Because when one person stands up, it's a gesture. But when others follow, it's a shift. And shifts, as we know, begin with walls that seemed eternal. When Rachel wrote that she had submitted her resignation, I realized that General no longer had a core, only a shell. And when the shell cracks, even the most precious reputation crumbles like glass in silence. I expected that after Rachel's dismissal, General would at least try to save face. I expected that after Rachel's dismissal, something would happen, that Larry would write to her, or expose her as an unproductive unit. But nothing. Silence. But not the kind of silence that suffocates. It was the silence that precedes an explosion. On the 3rd day after she left, Alex called me, a former analyst from my department. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from hesitation. "I think I'm next. After you, everything is wrong. They're trying to shut down what doesn't work and passing it off as optimization. We're not blind." I didn't try to convince him. I just said, "It's your decision, but if you leave, There's a place here for people who don't want to keep quiet anymore. The following week, Novacor grew by 2 more people. No loud announcements, no hiring through LinkedIn, just the right people at the right time. And then the fun began. The internal tool General, the one we had helped build over the years, started glitching. The algorithm didn't recognize some key queries. Customer contacts were no longer being recorded in the CRM system. On the surface, it looked like a technical error. But I knew what was going on. These tools were never built under the supervision of accountants. They were created by real people, the same people who were now working elsewhere, with new perspectives and new motivation. General proved incapable of maintaining its own infrastructure without the souls of those it had driven away. Meanwhile, Larry launched a trust restoration initiative. "We are open to dialogue," he wrote in his internal memo. But dialogue is not a slide. It is reciprocity. And at General, only the echo of his voice remained. I learned that HR was receiving more requests for exit interviews than ever before. That team meetings were held in silence. That clients were asking why features promised a quarter ago had not been delivered. This was not my plan. I did not plan to destroy General. I just refused to be its silent pillar. I didn't blow up General. I just removed what was holding it up. And without support, even the loudest facades begin to crumble. Without noise, but with consequences. "We'll get through this," Larry said, and there was no belief left in his voice. I was told that at one of the Friday meetings at General, Larry stood in front of the team with his arms wide open. "We'll get through this. All companies go through rough patches. The important thing is to stay united." United. Interesting word. Unity is not the result of fear. It is the result of trust. And he lost that trust before he even pressed send on my resignation letter. That same week, we launched Novacor in beta. The launch was quiet, without fanfare. But one tech review from an independent website called our product an example of ethical software, where the architecture is designed for people, not KPIs. It hit harder than any press release, because General had always sold itself as a people-centric platform. But inside the company, people didn't even trust each other in their own offices. And then something unexpected happened. One of General's clients, a large educational consortium, reached out to us. "We noticed that your new API solves problems that General has ignored for years. Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. But my colleagues at Novacor were already preparing analytics. We didn't sell. We responded. The market itself started knocking on our door. Meanwhile, Larry pretended that nothing was happening. Publicly, he talked about focusing on internal stability. But the team's email was ablaze. Why weren't we warned? Who will support the release? Why are some of our customers asking about Novacor? And then I realized, true revenge has no form. It is a shadow that falls on the face of those who think they are invisible. True revenge is when you are not even mentioned, but everyone understands. And understanding, as we know, always comes late, especially for those who never listened. The General backup database crashed at 3:14 a.m. Losses, 0. Symptoms, fatal. The first failure in the General internal system occurred on Tuesday at 3:14 a.m. The backup database didn't pull up to the report. Nothing catastrophic. But by morning, it was already being discussed on 3 different Slack channels. An hour later, the technical director arrived at the office. In person. Someone sent me a screenshot of his status. "On site, no panic, we're on it." Nothing says panic louder than the words, "no panic." And then a video appeared. Larry's speech at the weekly internal meeting. Someone recorded it. No words, no comments. Just his face against the General logo, slightly out of focus. "We have brought in external consultants to optimize the system. Some processes need to be rethought." External consultants. After the people who built these processes left. After they were humiliated, fired, ignored. Now, rethinking. Rachel wrote to me, "Everyone is afraid, but not you. They are afraid of silence, because it speaks louder than your words ever could." I didn't reply, not because I had nothing to say, but because the system began to speak in the silence. The connections that had held General together for years were breaking. People were no longer responding to emails. They were no longer agreeing to keep their position. And, most dangerously, they were no longer convincing themselves that this is normal. This week, 3 more people resigned. One of them was Peter, who once said to me, "Jess, just accept it. The system won't change." And now he has left it himself. I didn't run campaigns. I didn't write posts. I didn't record videos. I just built something new. And every day I spent at Novacore, every release, every bit of progress, was a response to what had happened. Real change doesn't make loud noises. It just turns off the sound. And then General did what we all wanted them to do. But not the way they imagined it. It was supposed to be a broadcast about the future of the company. It became the moment when General lost the right to speak on behalf of its people. They planned it as a rebranding. Officially, it was an open dialogue with management. In reality, it was a controlled fire extinguisher for smoldering embers that had already broken through to the outside world. The event was announced 2 days in advance, a live broadcast on YouTube with Larry and 3 key top executives. I opened the link out of curiosity. And no, not to see how everything was going according to plan. I wanted to know how much longer they could hold on to their false facade. The stream started with a delay. 5 minutes, then another 3. At the 9th minute, Larry's face appeared. For the first time in months, uncertain, not smiling, somehow broken. "General is not afraid of change," he began. Every word seemed to be copied from a banal anti-crisis spokesperson's handbook. "We listen to our employees. We are grateful to everyone who has been part of our journey. We recognize that some processes need to be adapted." I could see it. He was reading, with his eyes, from a teleprompter, out of fear, and then, the chat. Live on air. "You fired a person who lost his father. Where is the product team, Larry? Silence is also a choice, but we are no longer silent." It wasn't an attack. It was an awakening. Comments poured in every 2 seconds. Hundreds of viewers, many of them internal, but no longer silent. And then it appeared. The phrase that shattered the screen. "Jessica Simmons built what you are now copying." Silence. A delay. The stream was turned off after 15 minutes. That evening, an old colleague from the communications department wrote to me. "We didn't know what to do. Our hands were shaking, the chat wasn't being filtered, management was yelling over Zoom, and people just told the truth." The other day, General's press service issued a statement. "We have encountered technical difficulties. Thank you for your support." But it was too late. General could no longer pretend that everything was fine. And when your public image cracks, it doesn't matter what you say. What matters is what people see. When everyone starts talking at once, even the truth doesn't need a microphone. And that's when they first wrote to me directly. But not with an apology, not with an explanation, with an offer. They didn't offer an apology. They offered a role. It didn't come through the official address, not from ogeneralcorporate.com. It came from Larry's personal email. Subject: confidential conversation. "Jessica, I'd like to talk, unofficially, confidentially. We recognize that we made a mistake. You were the heart of the team, and we need you back, at least temporarily. Let's talk?" I read it 5 times, and I didn't feel anger, not satisfaction, just a strange, hollow nothingness. They didn't want me. They wanted a symbol to restore trust. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even tell the team. I just went for a walk. No phone, no discussion. It was like the moment after a breakup when your ex writes, "Maybe we could still..." But you're not there anymore. Not emotionally, not mentally, not strategically. I thought, what would my return achieve? It wouldn't save General's reputation. It wouldn't bring the team back. And most importantly, I'm no longer interested in fighting in the old system. I'm no longer playing on their field. That evening, I wrote a short message. "Larry, thank you for reaching out. But I didn't leave because I was offended. I left because General was no longer something I could serve. I hope you find the compass that once made this company strong." No period at the end, because I no longer needed to put a period there. The next day, I learned that 2 other executives had resigned. One of them had been in the same Zoom room when I was fired. His message to me was simple. Now I understand. And you know what was the biggest surprise? It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like closure. Like when you finally clean out your closet and leave only the things that suit you now. No regrets, no fuss. Because true revenge isn't when people fear you. It's when you're no longer looking in their direction. But the story didn't end there. Because against this backdrop, Novacor had something new in store. And now the ball was in our court. Exactly 1 hour had passed since I sent Larry my reply. At that time, my team and I had a meeting with representatives of a large international educational network. They were looking for a solution for managing student platforms. We already knew that they had tried working with General, and were disappointed. "We don't need big words," said the director. "We need stability, transparency, human logic." He didn't say ethics, but I heard it. And there I was, sitting in front of the screen. My team was nearby. No one was wearing business suits. No hierarchy, no walls. Just people who believe in each other. We didn't promise miracles. We didn't draw colorful slides. We showed how our interface works, how a student with visual impairments can easily register, how a teacher sees data not as numbers, but as real stories. At the end of the presentation, the director simply nodded. "This is what we need. This is the future." And then, for the first time in a long time, I breathed out. Not because we won the contract, but because we won something more. Respect. Not for the brand, for the approach. After the call, I stayed in the office alone. I stared at the empty monitor, and in my head, silence. Not emptiness, but a deep, pure calm. People often ask me why I didn't make a public statement, why I didn't write my truth, why I didn't destroy General completely, because it doesn't matter anymore. They destroyed themselves. And I built something. General still exists, but now it's a warning, not a beacon, but a wreck. And Novacor? Novacor is a choice, because some revolutions don't shout, they work.